Alright, so it is finally time. Several weeks after we got a brand new Pixar movie, I finally caught up on every single Pixar movie I needed to watch for the first time or rewatch, and today I'm going to do my big Pixar tier list. Here we go. Alright, couple things before we get started. Pixar, I think, is my favorite movie studio. Rewatching over 20 movies of this studio, or watching them for the first time, I realize that there's so many movies that are going to go in S tier. There's so many movies that are great. I adore this movie studio. I think they are the best one out there. Out of animated, out of anything. I love them. Also, quick thing before we get started, there is one movie I have not seen yet, Cars 2. I'm going to watch that tonight and then tack that on in the end of the video. So that's something that I'll be like completely dressed different. You're like, whoa, what happened? That's why. Also, the way the world works, tomorrow I'm leaving for a mission trip, and I'm not going to have time to rewatch two of them. One of them's Soul, the other one's A Good Dinosaur. I cut The Good Dinosaur out early because I didn't really want to rewatch it. So I'll talk about those two first. They might be a little bit outdated opinions. I plan on rewatching Soul once I get back, but those are two movies that I didn't get a chance to rewatch. So with that said, comment down below what is your either ranking or what tiers you're going to put all these movies in. And while you're down there, please make sure to hit the like button and hit the bell so you never miss another video. And subscribe. We're currently at 179, 200 by the middle of July. A special video coming out. And let's get started. The first movie we are going to talk about is The Good Dinosaur. And let's cut to the chase. This one's going right down and kill me. I do not like this movie. I watched it once, fell asleep a couple times while watching it. Didn't find the story to be generally interesting. I don't think I even finished the movie really. I think I turned it off with half an hour left because it's boring. I don't like the animation style, and so I could have had a chance to do a couple double features, like watched a couple movies instead of watching a couple episodes of a show and then a movie. So I could have done that and included this one. I just cut it out because I didn't want to rewatch it. There's not a single mood I'm gonna be in to want to rewatch The Good Dinosaur. It's a Pixar movie that feels like a kid's movie that just bores the heck out of me when I watched it for the first time. Never wanted to rewatch it again, so it's going straight down and kill me. It is the worst Pixar movie. Now let's move on to Soul. Again, opinions a little outdated here because it's been since 2021 when I rewatched this movie. That's 3 years ago, but I still fairly remember it. I would just like to rewatch it to get a fresh opinion, but I didn't get to do that. So Soul, for me, I am going to put on the good tier. I think it's a solid movie. It explores the afterlife in an interesting way. The voice cast is great. The animation is perfect. And it just has an emotional story that really, really works. It doesn't necessarily resonate with me, obviously, because I haven't died, but it's a story that I think people need to see. Again, it's a Pixar unique look into a certain subject that will happen in someone's life. And so it is very interesting that I do think the third act does a little bit too much. I think it tries to shove a little bit too much down our throats, but I don't necessarily think it works in the fullest in the third act. It's still good, but just kind of left me feeling just a little bit exhausted after that third act. So it's going in the good tier. It's not great. It might be great if I rewatched it, but again, haven't had the chance to do that here. Then let's move on to Brave. Now this is a movie that is special to me because growing up, I've heard that it's one of the worst Pixar movies. It's always at the bottom of people's rankings, but it's a movie with a story and themes that resonate with me. When I am full of mess ups today. When I watched it last, I was, I think, 16, almost the same age as the girl here, and the theme is about fighting with your parents, and that is a theme that teenagers can resonate. I resonated with it, and so stories about that really resonate with me more than others, as if you're like an adult. Same thing why Turning Red resonated with me. We'll get to that here in a few spots, but I really thought the overall emotional theme and the story resonated with me. It's got some inconsistencies. It rushes a little bit here and there. The pacing is really off at some spots, and the adventure is not as fun, but the emotional story works for me, and the story is fun. It's just not as fun, so it kind of knocks it down a little bit. but I just, again, really like that story, and so Brave is going to go in the great tier. Then we move on to Up, and when you talk about Up, everybody's first reaction is, man, those 15 minutes were great. It is some of the most perfect storytelling in animation, in film history. It is phenomenal. They made me cry last time I watched it, every time I watched this movie, and so I just really love those first 15 minutes. The overall adventure is just another fun Pixar adventure. Sometimes the pacing is a little off, but we're with Carl and we're with the little boy, and they have good chemistry. They go on a fun adventure where there's just all these creatures, and this one bad guy I think is pretty good. Pixar can make great bad guys, so it's just a very fun adventure throughout, capped at the beginning with some of the most emotional and raw storytelling in film history. So Up, another movie that has to go in the great tier. Then move on to Lightyear, another movie that people didn't like, and I love Lightyear. I think that it's not exactly the movie I think Andy would necessarily watch as a kid, but once you think about it, it's really the movie that younger generation watches to make them want to buy a Buzz Lightyear toy. It doesn't hit its mark, if that makes sense, with trying to convince us that's the movie Andy watched, but it's just kind of the newer generation making our youth watch this movie, and I think it's just a fun adventure. It's got action that's really good, it's got beautiful animation, and the twist here I think is actually pretty good. I am one of the only people that don't hate this twist. I think it's a pretty good twist. Chris Evans is great, and Socks is a blast. It's funny, so I really enjoy the movie Lightyear every time I go around to rewatch it. It's another movie going in the great tier. Then we move on to The Incredibles. Now, when I was growing up watching this, I didn't care for the movie as much. I thought it was really weird. Growing up, every time I rewatched the movie, I just noticed more and more about this movie. It's a more mature superhero movie about a man going through a midlife crisis that worries that he can't be incredible anymore, and that's just a theme that, you know, many people can resonate with. And that made, when I was really young watching this movie, that's probably why I didn't love it as much as other Pixar movies. But it's a movie that's special every time I rewatch it. Again, notice something more. It's a mature superhero story. It doesn't play to the common denominator. We love our cast here. Syndrome is an excellent villain, I think. He is absolutely great, one of the best Pixar villains, and so I again think The Incredibles is great. It goes in that tier. Obviously, though, I do think The Incredibles 2 is a little better. We'll talk about The Incredibles 2 here in a little bit. Then we move on to Turning Red. This was another movie that people didn't like when it first came out, and me, I actually kind of loved it. Now, again, it does the Brave story a little less, and if you hear a noise coming directly behind me, it's because my cat is on my bed. I'm trying to rearrange my studio, so I got a bunch of stuff on my bed. Anywho, so it's about, again, it's like the Brave story where it's about a teenage girl arguing with her mother 2 years ago. I was 16, so it's a story that resonated with me, but I don't necessarily think it's done in the best way, especially thinking about it. Like, the ending is a girl twerking at her mother to make her mother cringe and ultimately lose, and that's really weird. The puberty stuff doesn't quite work for me, but I do think that Turning Red, just its overall story, the way that it made me get emotional at the end of it, and even like the kind of and that it's done here. Every Pixar movie has a different kind of animation, and so while some themes don't necessarily work with me, the overall theme of fighting with your mother and getting along with your mother, again, works with me, and it's personal to me. So Turning Red, it's on the lower part of the great tier, but I still think Turning Red, when I watched it, was a great movie. Finding Dory. And we're on a hot streak with the great movies, because Finding Dory is going on the great tier as well. I never watched this when it first came out because people told me, yeah, it's exactly like Finding Nemo. I love Finding Nemo, so why would I watch Finding Dory? And so I watched it for the first time, and I genuinely loved it. I thought it was great. It has a very fun adventure where we're just doing all these wacky things. The cast is great. Hank the octopus is great. The new cast of characters are just really fun to be around, and the movie's genuinely funny. I can't tell you how many times I was laughing. My brother was playing video games. I was watching on my phone. I was just chuckling over there, and he's like, "What are you watching?" Because it's a funny movie. It's funny. It's got a fun adventure. I don't feel like the emotions resonated as well as they were trying to, because I feel like when they said, Dory, your parents are dead, I feel like that was a good emotional punch, but then we get like 5 minutes and we learn that they're actually still alive, and I think that is just a really weird direction to go. But it makes up for it with, again, the finale of the movie was fish driving a truck into the ocean. It's wacky, and it's a fun adventure, and I really did enjoy this movie. So Finding Dory also goes in the great tier. Then we move on to Inside Out, a movie that I grew up not liking. When I first saw it, I loved the Bing Bong part. That's about it. I didn't like the movie. I rewatched it for the first time this go around right before I saw Inside Out 2, and I thought it was a pretty great movie. Thing again that Pixar does is it shows us things that happen in our lives in a unique perspective. So we're seeing joy, sadness, how sadness is important in our lives, but it's a unique adventure. The adventure's fun. It can be funny sometimes. Don't get me started on Bing Bong, man. I cried when Bing Bong died. I mean, it's depressing at that point, and it's just overall got a good message, and it's pretty great. But I don't think it's as good as Inside Out 2. Plus, there is some big issues here. I think Joy is just a complete jerk in the movie. I could not stand Joy this entire movie. The way she was just like, sadness, go over there. I get it. She is kind of one-dimensional is the word I was thinking of, because she is an emotion, but I just could not stand her. I found she was annoying the entire movie. And then I just don't really understand how this world works. Like, how can you have character arcs when your emotions, you only have one emotion, unless they have emotions? That's my only problem with the world of Inside Out 2, because I don't get it. I don't get how emotions can have character arcs. It's kind of weird. But overall, Inside Out, even though I didn't like it growing up, I kind of turned a new leaf, and I thought this was a really great movie. Again, another great tier. Continuing the great hot streak, we go to Toy Story 4, another movie when I first watched back when it released in 2019, I didn't like at all. And rewatching it with my brother, I learned that it doesn't have some of the same magic the original trilogy does, but it's a story that's important to tell. It's an emotional story that I think really works. Once it gets into the swing of the adventures with Duke Kaboom, I think it's really fun. The movie can be really funny, especially when they're driving the SUV, or the RV rather, down the road and the toys are doing all that. It can be genuinely funny. Gabby is a fantastic villain. What the Toy Story franchise does best is has a great villain, and she has an emotional story that I think adds something fresh in here, and I think she really works. And Woody's overall character arc of learning that his time with kids is done, he needs to become a lost toy, move on, I think is still a perfect end to Woody's character. And overall, even though it doesn't have some of the same magic, I just really enjoyed watching this one and really turned over a new leaf. I think Toy Story 4 is pretty great, and it goes up in that same tier. I am worried for Toy Story 5, though. I don't think there should be a Toy Story 5. Then we got Ratatouille. This could be a little unpopular. Several movies like this, people are going to disagree with me, put them in the S tier, put them in the great tier, but Ratatouille I'm putting in the good tier. I think it's entertaining adventure. I do work in restaurants, so seeing how that works, I genuinely really love restaurant movies, and so I really did enjoy that aspect. The cast is great. There's some funny moments here, but the problem with this movie is I don't feel like it really hits the emotional arc that a movie like this should. Because with Pixar, it always has these deep emotions. I don't really feel like this one really hits it. I feel like it's an entertaining movie about a rat pulling guy's hair, having him control him while he's making food. It's a weird movie, but I do think it's a solid one. It's still a good movie. I just don't feel like it's good enough to go in the great tier. After Ratatouille, we got Cars 3. And so this was a movie that my brother loved. He watched it all the time when it first came out on Blu-ray. We got the Blu-ray. We watched it all the time. And I still think it's fun. I think it's a fun movie. It's not as good as the first Cars. I've yet to rewatch the second Cars as of filming this right now. But I do think it's a good movie. I find Cars 3 to be solid. I think the adventure is pretty fun. It doesn't really live up to the hype. I remember sitting in the theater, sitting back and seeing Lightning McQueen flip in the trailer and being like, whoa, no way they're actually going this route. I don't feel like it really capitalizes on that, but it's just an entertaining movie with a good story about Lightning McQueen and his relationship with this new girl and how she is now taking over as him as the racer. I think that she is a genuinely interesting character, and I did really enjoy this movie. I think it works, and so Cars 3 putting in the good tier. Alright, after Cars 3, we got Monsters University. Now, the two movies I think of when I think of Pixar, Toy Story, Monsters Inc. Monsters University is not Monsters Inc. The main issue with this movie is that it separates Sully and it separates Mike. They make them enemies for the majority of the movie, where these are two actors who have great chemistry. I love John Goodman. I think he's one of my favorite actors, and so just having them hate each other is not as fun. But when we get to the part in the middle of the movie where they just start liking each other, they do the big scare fest. It's entertaining and it's really fun. Again, more of the chemistry between our lead actors I feel really works, and it really works there. Another issue with when we go down to the end of the movie is that it just runs too long. I mean, obviously it's great when we learn that, oh no, Sully cheated? Okay, and it's telling like a genuinely interesting story, but then like we go to like this the human world and the camp, and it just kind of runs on a little too long, kind of runs out of steam for me there. But when we get to the scare fest stuff, when our characters like each other, it's good. It's a good prequel, and at the end of the movie when it shows us how they got to the position of where we're at in Monsters Incorporated, I feel like that's solid. So it's still a good movie, but it's very flawed. Toy Story 2, another movie going in the good tier, because I feel like this one is the most overrated Toy Story movie. Not that it's bad, it's still good, but I grew up loving the first Toy Story. I would watch it every chance I get, but my brother, not a fan of that because he's dumb or whatever, and so he just always turned on Toy Story 2. He says Toy Story 2 is his favorite. And so I cannot tell you how many times that I was like, let's watch Toy Story, and he's like, okay, Toy Story 2. And I've seen this movie over times, and while it's still pretty great as a movie, Jesse's character arc is fantastic. Stinky Pete is a great villain, and that is easily the highlight of this movie, some of the best of the franchise. It's just not as fun as an adventure as the rest of them. The adventure kind of just gets me bored while I'm watching it because I've just seen it so much, and it's hard not to hold that back from it because it's not the movie's fault. It's just the fact that it just doesn't hold up as fun as an adventure as the rest of the movies do. So still a good movie. Stinky Pete and the Jesse stuff is top tier in this franchise. I just don't think it really works as much as the other three movies. Then we move on to Elemental, our first movie going in the meh tier. I liked a lot of stuff about it. I like the chemistry between our two actors. I think it's genuinely interesting, but this movie just is scattered all over the place to where it's a movie about a romance that Pixar's supposed to have mature themes that people can resonate with, but also work for younger audiences. And I don't see this one working for younger audiences whatsoever. It spends so much time on the romance and really works for a older audience. But I don't think the movie is as charming or as adventurous as it, and there's several pacing issues in the movie, and while there are still great things in here, some more great Pixar stuff in here, I really like the world building. That was pretty cool. I just watched it, and my brother just kind of clocked out at like half an hour into the movie. He's like, yeah, this is dumb, I'm gonna go play video games or something. And I finished the movie, and I thought it was fine. It's just kind of a meh movie because the themes and what makes Pixar movies special isn't really present here, so I'm gonna put Elemental in the meh. Alright, we're gonna be getting a streak of S-tier movies here because these movies are phenomenal. The ones I'm about to talk about here again, Pixar, best studio, love them, and they got so many S-tier. Let's get our party started with Onward. Now, this was a movie that when I first watched it, I loved some of the themes, but the adventure wasn't as fun. There were some pacing issues. When I rewatched it, I adored this movie. I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic. And I mean, it's one of the most emotional Pixar movies. It's got themes that resonate with me about being the older brother and trying to live up to that while being fun and trying to live your life, you know, especially when you lose a parent. I haven't lost a parent, so that theme doesn't really resonate with me. It's still emotional, but doesn't resonate with me. But the theme about just the older brother stepping up was very emotional, and I didn't expect when I watched it to bawl my eyes out, and I did, because it's sad and it's very good. The adventure is fun. There's a nice world here for Pixar to have here. Our two leads, when Chris Pratt, Tom Holland, they are very good in here, so some great emotional moments. I don't necessarily think that a dragon as the final act really fit in here, but then we get that scene where Barley finally gets to talk to his dad again, and that's very emotional. It's a very great movie, and it goes in the S tier for just breaking my heart. So, yeah. Alright, then we move on to Toy Story 3. This movie was literally my childhood. I used to think that this was a horror movie because I'm genuinely terrified every time that they're doing the escape sequence. I think the escape sequence is phenomenal. It's some of the best Toy Story stuff we had, and while the movie's dragging a bit of the beginning, I still think it's just another great Pixar Toy Story adventure, because we follow these characters we love. They're in this dangerous situation. You feel the danger the entire movie, and then you finally get the relief. They escaped, and Lotso, who is the best Pixar villain of all time, just walks down and he shows up, and you just feel the danger in it. And then when you finally get to the part where they're in the trash area, they're about to burn, you feel like they could die, and it's dangerous. It's terrifying to see our characters. Pixar traumatized us as kids, and so it goes in the S tier just because of that alone. But then we get that final sequence where Andy's playing with his toys for the last time, when this beautiful music is playing. It's the best sequence in all of Pixar, I think, and so it's a fantastic movie. It's literally the first horror movie that I genuinely loved, and it goes in the S tier. Why don't we stay in the Toy Story area here for a little longer with the original Toy Story. It is the best Pixar movie of all time. It's the first Pixar movie, and it is still the best in my opinion. It's just a genuinely fun adventure with two leads that we absolutely love. Woody and Buzz have great chemistry throughout the entire movie. They are charming. Sid, another fantastic Pixar villain. He genuinely is terrifying. Dude, the Toy Story movies are pretty scary. I mean, Toy Story 4, we got the dolls. Toy Story 3, we got the Lotso and how evil he is. Toy Story 2 is not really scary, but Toy Story 1, we got Sid. These are horror movies for kids. I mean, dang. So Sid is a great villain, but it's just overall a story of friendship, and it's just a nice breeze by of a movie. It's a comfort movie. I'll watch this movie 3 or 4 times a year. I adore this movie. I find it to be really entertaining, a great story, great animation for back in its time, and I just love this movie. It is the best Pixar movie of all time, and it also goes in the S tier. Then we move on to Monsters, Inc. Again, two movies that I think of when I think of the Pixar brand: Toy Story and Monsters Incorporated. This is another movie in my childhood. I love Monsters Incorporated. I think it is phenomenal. Again, we got the two great leads in here with Sully and Mike. They have fantastic chemistry. It's a very fun adventure. There's some horror elements again with what they do to Mike in the middle. I used to be terrified of that as a kid. Found it more charming now than I did as a kid, but I still think it is genuinely can be terrifying, and it's pretty funny. Again, a fun adventure with Boo. And then we get that just the kick in the teeth in the end of the movie when we get Sully just having to say bye to Boo, and it is emotional. Again, these movies have these emotional sequences that really just cap off the movie, and this movie really had that just brought a tear to my eye. I thought it was beautiful. Randy, again, another fantastic Pixar villain, and so I just love Monsters, Inc. It's one of the two movies in Pixar that just defined my childhood, and so this is another movie that goes all the way up in the S tier. Moving on, we got the reason I'm doing this video, Inside Out 2, and this goes in the S tier. I love this movie. I think it was a movie that everybody needs to see, that represents all of our emotions with joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust. But then we get anxiety in the mix, and as Riley's growing up, everybody gets anxiety. Every single person gets anxiety, and so it's represented in a fantastic way. It's everything that we have represented in a fantastic way, and even like the good side of anxiety, the bad side of it, it's represented great. I feel like the other emotions kind of took a back burner, but still, anxiety is great. And when we get to the end with the panic attack, it's great. It's an intense movie too, because we were all in Riley's shoes. Every one of us were that awkward middle schooler going into high school phase, so we were like, oh, she's gonna do that decision. Oh yeah, I done that. Bring back bad memories, why don't you? That's what this movie was, and I feel like it's perfect for that. It has great emotions in the end. The adventure that our main characters go on is funny. It's more fun than the first movie. So as someone who never grew up loving the original Inside Out, rewatched it, thought it was great but flawed. Inside Out 2 lifted my expectations. I adored this movie, and I think it is fantastic. It's in the S tier. Then we got our last S tier movie for now. We got Coco. This is a movie that I also skipped out when it first came out. I watched bits and pieces of it. I knew the twist. Every time I went to a certain friend's house, they had this movie on loop. But I never fully watched the movie. I don't know if it's because I was young and kind of explored the Day of the Dead. I was never allowed to watch it, but I just never got a chance to watch it fully. And on the surface, it's another fun Pixar adventure. We're exploring the land of the dead. Again, great characters that we care for. Nice theme about music. And then we get the last, I'd say, 40 to 50 minutes of the movie, and that is an emotional train wreck. Man, like, wow. The amount of emotions that this movie can pull out of me, it's great. Not that it's, like, personal or anything, but having our characters and our main character, can't remember his name right now, but the skeleton guy, and as he's fading away, his daughter can't remember him. It's emotional in that aspect. But then we get to the twist, and the twist with another one of the best Pixar villains. This guy is top 2, Ernesto de la Cruz. He is fantastic in this movie, and he is just such a great villain, and terrifying too. And then when we get to like the ending of the movie, this that twist where this guy is his actual great granddad, and I thought it was great. It was a great twist, had some fantastic emotions in there. It's a very emotional story inside of Pixar. So those last 50 minutes had the funness of it, had the entertaining aspects of it, but it's just overall an emotional movie, and it really, really works. Hey everybody, this is the next day that I told you about, to where I might stop in between it, record again, and here I am. You see different pants, different shirt. I'm on a Shrek shirt. We left off at Coco, now we're on to The Incredibles 2. Now this is a movie that I do really enjoy, and honestly, I think that this is a better film than the first one is. Honestly, I just think it's got a much simpler plot. It's got better action sequences, it's got better character arcs, it's got funnier moments. I just think it really works as a huge blockbuster inside of this Incredibles franchise. Well, the first one kind of had a lot of different themes going to it. This one's more straightforward, into where people can feel it's too simple. It's not as extravagant as the last one. I feel it's more watchable. Anytime someone walks up to me and says, hey, want to watch The Incredibles? I will always say, okay, or we can watch The Incredibles 2, because I think The Incredibles 2 is a better film. I get people's problems with it, but overall for me, I just really do like this one much better than I do like the original Incredibles. So The Incredibles 2 is going on the great tier. Heading on to Luca, this is one I had a review when it first came out. I was actually on my way home from a church camp, and me and my friend Akario watched it, and we both genuinely enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. Rewatching it, I still think it's pretty good. I think the movie really shines when we're focusing on our 3 characters, and they're just hanging out. They're not doing anything bad. They're just hanging out as a bunch of friends, just like friends do. And I feel that the movie really works when it's that. And then we head to the third act, where there's a lot of emotional moments, especially with Alberto, where you know exactly where his father plotline's going, and the way with the girl's dad, I can't remember her name or his name, but the way that their interaction was together was heartwarming, and there's some big emotional moments in the end that brought a tear to my eye, and I find that they really worked. This is the perfect summer Pixar movie about a bunch of friends hanging out in the summer. Yeah, it dragged just a little bit in the very beginning, but once it gets through the full swing of things, it's very fun, and our villain here is another great Pixar villain. Then we move on to Finding Nemo. Personally, I think I would rewatch Finding Dory over this one. I found Finding Dory to be very fun. Does that mean Finding Nemo's not great? No, Finding Nemo in the great tier. Again, this is a movie that I feel like it just has a little bit holding it back from being as great as the original Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. But I just think it's just a fun adventure, whether you get the emotional arc about Marlin and him losing his son. That very beginning where he loses his wife is extremely emotional, and it's just a story that can resonate well with people. Obviously, me being 18-year-old male, I don't have any children, so I can't really relate to that story, but it's very emotional in the way it's represented, and our adventure here is very fun with some great iconic moments in here. Our villain is horrifying. I used to genuinely be creeped out when she would show up on screen when I watched this movie as a kid. So again, I think that Finding Nemo's great. I do think that the adventure in Finding Dory is a little better though, and it always has something a little holding it back from being as great or as memorable as the other movies on the S tier like Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. was still a great movie. Then we move on to A Bug's Life. This was a movie that I saw once, I genuinely enjoyed. I rewatched a couple days ago, and I genuinely enjoyed it there too. My favorite part about this movie, I think, was when we're just with our main bug, Flick, and he's like going to all these areas and we see how the bug's life works. Like when we're in the circus area, the bar, I thought all that was the best sequence in the entire movie. And we got a nice cast of characters here. I find everybody to be genuinely enjoyable and have solid character arcs here. And our villain in Hopper, I think, is really intimidating. Again, Pixar makes fantastic villains, and there was a fantastic villain in this movie. In Hopper, I think he's great, and it's just a fun adventure. That's all it needs to be. It's not even really just a big sweeping adventure. It's about technically like a Seven Samurai, but it's Pixar, and so I genuinely did enjoy it. I found that the finale was just endlessly entertaining, and this is a movie that I will always really enjoy every time I watch it. It doesn't have an emotional hook, though, as in early Pixar movies, Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. This is the only second Pixar movie, so it doesn't really have the big emotional hook, and that's what's making me put it in the good tier. But I do love the score here. It reminded me of my childhood, and I thought the score was fantastic. 3 more to go here. We move on to WALL-E. This was a movie that I watched for the first time, and I felt a little disappointed by it. Don't get me wrong, in the good tier you go, but I didn't necessarily feel as if WALL-E was the best Pixar movie like a lot of people are saying it to be. The movie, I just don't buy the romance between two robots. It just feels like WALL-E at first is just coming on a little strong. It just feels like the romance felt a little forced in there. And then when we get onto the ship with all the robots and humans, it's very interesting. We see where humanity has gone, and I find the lore building inside this movie to be its best part, its strongest aspect. But something was just a tiny bit offensive about all humans being fat and can't get up. I feel like they could have done that a little better, but I still thought that was very interesting, and I was entertained through the majority of the movie. Following WALL-E on this adventure is entertaining. Again, it's another Pixar adventure, and Pixar adventures, what are they? They're very entertaining, and so this one was. Until we get to the third act, where like this captain's fighting the robot and the whole ship's flipping, and I feel like it just does too much. It's all like, okay, that's what we're doing. Okay, it started to feel a little bit simple and a little bit predictable. That's what this movie started to feel like, was predictable by the end of the film. And WALL-E has a beautiful character arc throughout the entire film, but I just feel like it's not as great as people made it out to be. I was excited to watch this one because people said, it's an S-tier Pixar movie, it's fantastic. And I just got a good film, but heavily flawed film, so it goes in the good tier. Now let's talk about the final 2 movies, which are Cars 1 and Cars 2. Starting off with Cars 1, these 2 movies are my childhood. In fact, I still have in that very closet right over there, I'm not going to show you because it's a mess, but I still have the Lightning McQueen and all of the characters, their car Hot Wheels for every single movie, and it's just my childhood. I grew up watching this movie. This is the first time I watched it in years, and yes, I thought it was great. It was great as a racing story. All the racing sequences are great. Lightning McQueen is a compelling character, and it's just a charming story to see Lightning McQueen come out of Radiator Springs and just grow as a better person throughout the entire movie, or better car, should I say? Anyways, and I just found his character arc to be pretty great throughout the entire movie, and that's really what holds it together, is the fact that it's just charming. It's a movie about friendship. Owen Wilson and Larry the Cable Guy, their chemistry is unmatched. They're great. That's one of my problems with Cars 2, is that Owen Wilson felt like he phoned it in, but their chemistry was great in this one. They try to do some emotional moments about the town. I don't feel like they fully hit, but they're still solid. And so it's just a movie about friendship and growing as a better person. And then we get great racing sequences in the middle there of this movie. So Cars, I think, goes on the great tier. And then our last movie, we're talking about a movie that I watched last night after getting a mean workout at the gym. Cars 2. Cars 2. And I think this movie's more of my childhood than the first Cars movie is. I think I grew up with this movie more than I did with the first Cars, because I just remember all these sequences and remembering just sitting on the couch watching this movie. It's a weird sequel. Cars 1, Cars 3, they're about racing. This movie's about Mater being a spy, but I found the spy adventure to be fun. I found it was fun and charming. I think the dialogue was pretty bad. There's multiple instances where it's like, we need to get this camera because it holds this, does this, and that, and that. And it's really kind of bland. The movie's predictable, obviously, and we get some phone-in performances. Like I mentioned, Owen Wilson, not as great in here, but I do think that it's a fun movie. It's really my childhood with a fun adventure for Mater. Some moments about friendship in there, and all the race sequences are still as good. So this movie defines my childhood, I think. Cars 2 is the most overhated Pixar film. I think it would work better if it was like a direct-to-video sequel, though. Like, this feels like a direct-to-video sequel, but it feels like a very good direct-to-video sequel. So Cars 2 goes on the good tier. So that was my tier list. Here it is. Here we got a bunch in S tier. We got a bunch in great tier. We got some in good tier. We got one in meh, and we got one in kill me. There's not a bad Pixar movie besides The Good Dinosaur. So let me know down below, what is your ranking for every single Pixar film, or you can do your tier list. I don't care. Next up, will either be a Despicable Me ranking or a review if the review's already out. I'm gonna see if I have time to film it, but I gotta go on the mission trip, so you're not gonna get another video for about a week, or at least until next Saturday. So thank you guys for clicking on this video, and with that said, subscribe, join the Nerd Army. Peace out.